Welcome in. It's another edition of the Doyel and Derek podcast, here with the IndyStar, once again connecting over Skype. I'm Derek Schultz, and the star of the show, as always, is IndyStar sports columnist Gregg Doyel. What's up, my friend? We got a lot to talk about in this edition, don't we?
We actually have sports to talk about, don't we?
It's beautiful.
Something actually happened, and now we can talk about something. That's pretty good.
You know, I didn't know what to expect with this, like internet Zoom NFL draft. It's unprecedented, right? You're used to the NFL draft where you have the awkward bro hug between Goodell and the prospects, and they're all dressed to the nines, and they got their family with them. And weren't they going to come in on like a yacht or something this year? It's so crazy over the top. And then instead, it's sort of like, Goodell is Mr. Rogers, and it's a campfire chat at his house. And he's reading you a bedtime story, kind of reading off these picks. And I didn't really know what to think of it coming in, but I liked it, Greg. Did you actually like they were forced into this, obviously, so I don't know how much longer we would continue to have NFL drafts like this, but I kind of like this curveball, whereas I thought it could potentially have been a disaster a week ago.
Yeah, there was no glitches at all that I know of. Yeah, I'd rather see this every year. I hate those hugs I hate them. I hate those hugs.
They overdo it.
What's weird, and I don't understand why the players do that, because the moment you sign your contract, Goodell's your enemy. It's the owners and the players.
Sure.
And there's labor strife, and Goodell's the one that's going to suspend you 9 games for blowing your nose in the wrong spot. Why are you hugging him? I don't understand why the union hasn't gotten a hold of the draft prospects, the ones in New York or wherever the draft is every year, and said, hey, don't buddy with the guy, because he's not your friend. I've never understood that. I'd much rather see these guys in their homes with their girlfriends and their multiple phones and their parents and their dad fainting, like whoever that prospect was, that kid's kind of fainted, like, oh, what just happened? And he clearly wanted some attention and he got it. So I'd rather see all this than those awful hugs.
I have no idea when it started either, because I know it never happened with Tagliabue. Because, when I was growing up, and obviously I'm a little bit, well, I shouldn't say obviously, that makes me sound like a jerk. Obviously, I'm a little bit younger than you, Greg. I am younger than you, Greg. And when I was growing up, the NFL draft was just becoming a thing. And it was Saturday and Sunday. And I think the first 2 rounds were Saturday. And then it was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, bang, 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 Sunday. And it was an all-day event. And the TV coverage, Mel Kiper, and then later on it was Todd McShay, but it was mostly dominated by ESPN. It was before the NFL Network was around. And it's not what it's grown into, but it was still a fairly big deal. And I just don't remember I don't remember the hugs, and I don't remember it being as over the top as it is. But with all things, as time goes on, it gets more and more crazy. And it was nice to see a more kind of ramped down NFL draft, I thought.
I suppose that, like a lot of things, a guy or 2 hugged Roger, and then 4 or 5 hugged him, and then it becomes, look, I watched the UFC, and Bruce Buffer about 3 years ago, because he gets in their face when he's introducing him, and somebody, I don't know who it was, somebody put his hand out and they fist bumped. And now probably 3/4 of the fighters bump fists with Buffer before the fight, and pretty soon it's going to be everybody. Yeah. He in this corner, or in this side of the cage, whatever. So it just, things like that grow. But I'm more puzzled by something you said earlier. Obviously, you said I'm younger than you, Greg.
Yeah, that was.
Why is it obvious?
Thing to say.
Why is it obvious?
I don't know why it's obvious. I mean, I have I still have colored facial hair, so I think that's probably part of it. I have a little bit still on top here, hair-wise, right? Shows I'm a little bit younger.
Son, I was writing stories before you were out of diapers. So if you want to talk about, I'm going bald and I'm going gray.
I'm not that young. I'm not that young, my man. What are we? Are you 45?
Close enough. All I can tell you is I had a birthday a couple days ago. Happy
birthday.
Thank you. And my girlfriend, wonderful woman named Whitney, bought me about the nicest heavy bag, freestanding heavy bag you can buy, and put it in her garage and helped me assemble it. And today I had a great workout on a heavy bag in her garage. So I may be 97 years old, but I can kick everybody's ass. Or
I haven't been in the gym. I haven't been in the gym in 2 months. You could definitely kick my ass, Greg.
Nobody
There's
has.
no doubt about that.
I finally got a workout. I finally sweat today. It was unbelievable.
I feel terrible. I'm looking at some of these draft prospects, and I'm like, damn, are they doing like push-ups at home or what? I mean, I guess a lot of them have private access to gyms that they can go to, but I'm feeling way, way, way out of it.
Speaking of which, by the way, hold on. I know we're going to talk almost all NFL, but access to gyms. I find it really interesting that the NBA is going to, in the states that rescind the stay-at-home orders, and right now Oklahoma and
Georgia,
right?
Yeah.
Oklahoma and Georgia, and about 8 or 10 others, they expire if they don't get renewed. They expire at the end of April. If you're in those states, if you're franchised in those states, they can open their facility up for just go up there and get some shots up, and it's not a huge deal. Yet I'm not sure how I feel about the NBA saying half our players can use their team facilities, and the other half, because you live in a state where your governor actually cares about your well-being, you can't work out in your gym, and maybe not. You can't work out anywhere if you don't have access to a court. I think that's a terrible idea.
I saw a follow-up from, I think it was from Wojnarowski, that said that the NBA is going to do everything it can to facilitate getting players from states that are still on shelter in place to facilities in other states that aren't. But to me, it just, I feel like you're just opening it up for people questioning that and thinking that there's an unfair advantage.
Well, how are you going to get somebody? Let's say this thing goes on for 3 more months, the shelter in place in some states. So, and Indiana right now is shelter in place. Are they going to say, Victor Oladipo, I'll tell you what, you played in Oklahoma City once, you might know where the restaurants are. We will put you in an extended stay hotel or a nice hotel, whatever, for 3 months, just so you can get up 45 minutes of shots a day or 3 hours of shots a day. But you've got to pack up and leave wherever you live and go stay in a hotel in one of their states. Meanwhile, Russell Westbrook is sleeping at home every night and going to the gym and then coming home.
Yeah. I hear you.
And again, I realize getting up shots, it's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal, but it's something. If it was nothing, then nobody get up shots. If it doesn't matter, then don't shoot. It obviously matters because they're going to go to the gym and shoot in their home gym, and 80% of the league isn't. And I don't get it.
Yeah, it's something to keep an eye on for sure, because I still, as excited as I was, I'm still very skeptical that we're going to complete this NBA season.
We're not going to complete this.
I don't think that it's going to be with fans. If they do complete something, there won't be any people in attendance for it.
We're not completing this NBA season. We're not resuming this NBA season. And everybody out there listening that's mad, like, I have no power. Me saying that, I'm not speaking it into existence. I'm not Roger whoever the damn NBA, Adam Silver, whoever's running the league, which is really Wojnarowski. He's not listening to me right now and saying, "Oh, Greg says, therefore I've got nothing to." I'm just saying it's not going to happen. So, and I suspect you probably agree, but anyway, I just and listen, I'm in what's it called? Fusix. It's a downtown hardware store next to Needler's near Mass Ave.
Okay.
Possible my girlfriend lives right off Mass Ave. It's possible I've got the absolute coolest woman that you've ever seen. It's all these things are possible.
Yeah.
Here's what's definite is that I'm in Fusix today and I'm wearing my little mask and the woman helped me is wearing her mask and she's talking about how just kind of grumbling about how, this is all going to, because I said, she made a comment about the virus and I said, yeah, that's the way it is right now. She goes, yeah, it's going to come back in the fall. That's what they say. They say it's going to keep, spiking and all that. And okay. And then she says, she kind of mutters under her breath as she walks away. More people still die from the flu. And she walks off like, that is the talking point that the other side says. The flu kills more. Okay. How about this? Let's just take the shelter in place out. Let's go back 2 months. Take it out. Let's play the Final Four, March Madness, and all these basketball games. Let's let everybody cough on everybody, and let's have the movie The Stand happen in real life, and let's have 100 million Americans die. Is that what you want? Do you want to go back in time and kill all of us so at least you can say, well, it would have been worth it to shelter in place because, damn, this thing killed everybody. No, we're sheltering in place, and we're flattening the curve a little bit. Please don't play the flu kills more. Apples and oranges.
I'm not a doctor. I'm not a mathematician. I can tell you this: nobody's going to be able to find a flu season in modern history that killed 50,000 people in 6 weeks. So
people don't want to hear facts. All they want, and listen, as someone, and of course you're out of work, but I get furloughed. I'm getting furloughed in a week and a half, so I'm not completely working, but I'm not out of work. So I get it. I really do get it that if you're out of work, or if your parents are out of work, or your kids are out of work, or whatever. I mean, believe me, I mean, this blows, and this is. I mean, I don't even mean, I'm not making light of any of that. I get it. It's just that, and there's got to be certain people that can go back to your jobs. There's got to be things that surely there are certain people that can go back. Just because we can't play Major League Baseball doesn't mean that you can't go sit in your office somewhere. Surely we can get some people back, but I just can't hear the rationalization of how this isn't that big a deal. This is the worst deal we've had in our lifetime, and only the extraordinary measures we're taking has not made this thing a sci-fi movie. That's it.
Yeah, I understand people's frustration. I just don't get the stupidity. You know, you can be frustrated, just don't be dumb. And I think we're getting a lot. And you know what, Greg, honestly, I think it's a very small number of people that we're talking about that are really being reckless and stupid and ignoring this and all of that. But those are the people that get the most play, because that's what people like to click on and talk about on the TV news and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of dumb, we're going to talk about what happened to Jacob Eason.
Yeah, you were fired up about that.
By the way, I'm going to, you know how Brian Hoyer, I've called him Brian Hoying or Bobby Hoyer or whatever I've done. I've already stopped myself twice in stories. I've had to wait a minute, what'd you say? I've called him Tony twice. I've called him Tony Eason twice, and I've deleted it.
That's a throwback.
Yeah, before his dad's name is Tony, but his dad's not the Tony that played for the Patriots. But anyway, I'm a little bit older than you, and I grew up with Tony Eason as the quarterback that I know. So there's a quarterback here, and his name is Eason, and I'm going to call him Tony, and it's just going to happen. And anyway, but that's not the stupid part about this weekend, although that is pretty stupid. The stupid part is that Jacob Eason doesn't get drafted in round 1. No one's really talking about it. So what? He wasn't going to go in 1. He doesn't get drafted in 2 or 3. And I'm not sure it would have been okay then. But at some point, maybe you say there's some issues with Jacob Eason that, whatever. I don't think I would have liked it then. But what I don't like is he gets picked in round 4. The moment happens for him. And that's when Chris Mortensen says, well, he's got some character issues. And he names 2 of them: accountability, which is a very vague, I don't even know, okay, prove that one. Accountability, and also work ethic.
Work ethic, yeah.
Okay, he's 6'6", 230, and throws the ball farther than anybody but Pat Mahomes. He's worked pretty hard to get that. But he throws out these 2 vague things and then says there's a list of 4. I mean, Mortensen said there's a list of 4 or 5 character issues here with Jacob Eason. That's why he slid. And he said that on ESPN. And keep in mind that I don't know if we have the ratings yet for this thing, but this thing was watched by 100 million people or probably more. I mean, everybody heard that. And that's what happened to this guy. And the thing is, this guy got drafted by the Patriots or the Steelers or anybody else. I'd have thought that's unfortunate, but I wouldn't have written a whole column about it. But he got drafted by the team in my city. I was pissed. And anyway, I'm still pissed.
Well, the thing is, Greg, think about this. He's not there. His family isn't there. So guess what? They're seeing all of it, right, unfold on TV. And I guess you could say, well, that's the case for any 4th-round pick, because the green room guys are only, they invite the top 40 or something like that. But still, yeah, I'm kind of with you. My first reaction was, wow, really? We're going to drop? Because usually you start with the compliment and then you say, oh, but he may have fallen because of this, right? But you lead with the good stuff, 95% of the time. I remember when Randy Moss got taken, whatever that was, 20-something years ago. And even they rolled through his highlights and talked about how dominant he was. And then they were like, oh, yeah, well, this, and this happened to him while he was at Marshall or on his way to Marshall.
And here's the thing, Derek.
It's fine to mention that.
Nothing happened to Jacob Eason. There is no this, and this. There's no video of him on the sideline getting into it with somebody. There's no video of him asleep by a pool while his team is practicing. There's no video. There's no police report. There's no arrest. There's nothing. There is nothing there. And I'm not saying the guy's Mr. Perfect. We might find out that he's a jerk. We might, or lazy, or what we might. But right now, Mort is letting anonymous sources bash this kid. And you just don't do that. You damn sure don't do it right then. You just don't do it. And the thing about Mortensen is, what really pisses me off is his son was a big-time recruit at quarterback just like Eason transferred. He went from Arkansas to Samford, tried out the NFL, didn't make it. I'm not here to say Alex Mortensen, Chris's son, is not good football. My point is not that. My point is, Mortensen, you're a dad. You had a son walk in very similar shoes to Jacob Eason, and you're trashing Jacob Eason with hot air from people that might have an agenda with no facts, like zero. I'm still pissed off about it.
I mean, somebody had to have told him something, but that doesn't mean that is the truth of the, I talked to a guy in Seattle that I know pretty well, Dave Softy Mahler, who's been a host there for a million years, and he's like the UW super guy. And he told me that he never got the vibe that he said that Eason, and when he said it, it reminded me, you remember AJ Hammons? He would have come in, he would have been there right when you started here.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think AJ Hammons was lazy. I think AJ Hammons was just a really super quiet, laid back kid. And I think that came off as him being lazy. And that's what he kind of said about Eason, was that I don't think he was lazy. I just think he was kind of a quiet, laid back kid. So take that for whatever it's worth.
What happened before the NBA draft this year? There was some scuttlebutt, not much, but there was some about, does Romeo love the game enough? He was asked about that at the draft combine in Chicago. And Romeo is one of these guys that just, you can't tell what's going through his head because he never changed his facial expression. And we want people, I guess, to look like we expect them to look at all times. And if they don't, well, then something's wrong there. Not everybody is wired the way you're wired, but even so, I don't like empty hot air. I've been told a lot of bad things about a lot of people that I've never written. Like Mortensen, put it this way. If he were a sports writer for the IndyStar or ESPN.com, whatever, your editor won't let you run with that. You can't write that. And your editor won't print that. Like, okay, what is it? You can't, but because you're on TV and there's no one to stop you, I've been on radio shows and said some stuff that I would never write, and I'm not proud of that. You just can't.
Say whatever you want.
You can say whatever you want. And so anyway, it sounds like I got a horrible axe to grind with Chris Mortensen. I really don't. This one moment, this one kid coming to the team in my city, and I don't know if this makes me a homer. I really don't know. I really, Jacob Eason, you can win or lose games. That's up to you, but no one's crapping on kids in my city. It's not going to happen. Not without me.
Eason was, while we're on the topic, I know he was the fourth guy taken, but because we're on Eason right now, let's talk about him as a prospect and as a player. I thought Chris Ballard was very blunt discussing him. I don't think fan expectations, just because he's a quarterback, maybe fans expect him to be something. To me, Greg, this is the ultimate flyer pick. Jacob Eason, over the life of his rookie deal, is only going to make something like $3 or $4 million. It's really not a huge chunk of change. A fourth-round pick isn't a gigantic investment. If there's something there with that great body and arm that he has, then maybe the Colts can tap into that and build on it, and it's found money. But if there's not, then you have a cheap backup for a couple of years. I mean, that's how I'm approaching it. I'm not viewing him as the quarterback of the future because I just don't know if he's capable of doing that without an extreme amount of polish from what I've read up on him.
Yeah, what you can't do is you can't refer to his he's got a great arm. You've got to say arm talent. It's just, if you want to be cool, you got to say QB1, WR2,
QB1, yeah.
And you got to say arm talent, and you got to say players flash. Players don't look good. They don't make a big play. They don't do whatever. Players flash in training camp. So make sure you get the cool football lingo down, because that's the way it's going to be. I was taken aback by how hard Ballard, and I wasn't on that Zoom call. I just read the transcripts later, but I was taken aback by how hard he went on the slow down the hype train for Jacob Eason. I keep wanting to call him Tony. Not that anybody was hyping him up, really. I mean, I when he got drafted, I tweeted out, "Hello, Colts quarterback of the future," which may have been an overstatement, anyway, we're not really hyping him that much. And even my story defending him, his right to not be crapped on by ESPN, never said he's going to be great. But Chris Ballard all he said was he's competing with Chad Kelly. I mean, never mind. I mean, he's not competing with Brissett. He's competing with Chad Kelly. You drafted a fourth-round guy to compete with a guy that's on your taxi squad? I mean, that's really weird to come out and say that and actually to mean that.
Well, Ballard's got to coddle his guy. So You know, it shouldn't even make me angry, Greg, but it makes me angry how much they coddle him. And people, were responding to me last night on Twitter. And they were saying, Schultz, what do you want Ballard to say about Brissett? I just don't. I want Ballard to be straightforward with me like he is with everybody else. The only guy that Ballard is not straightforward about is Brissett. They can sit there and say all they want about how much they value him, and they might really value him as a guy. I don't dispute any of that. I believe that they love him as a person and as a locker room guy. But every single action that they've made this offseason has shown that they don't think Jacoby Brissett is their guy. So Ballard and the Colts can talk around that all they want, but this whole embellishment of, oh, he's still a top 20 guy, he's still a star, baloney. You don't feel that way. If you felt that way, you wouldn't have paid a 38-year-old $25 million.
Right. If you still think he's a starter in this league, then you keep him around, you re-sign him to an extension, and when Philip Rivers finally retires, you've got your guy. You don't draft Jacob Eason if Jacoby. I loved your tweet. I forget exactly what you said but you laid out the facts of they don't really like Jacoby, and then you quote him, but he's our guy. You laid out the facts. They signed Philip Rivers, but he's our guy. They draft Jacob Eason, but he's our guy. I mean, that was a great tweet. I loved it.
Yeah, and it just frustrates me because I feel like I like Chris Ballard. And I know you like Chris Ballard. And I think he's a smart guy. And I think for the most part, he's been about as honest as you can be. But I just feel like they've been coddling Brissett along the way here. And I can't really figure out why, because I think it's really poor roster management to have three quarterbacks, especially when one of them is making $21 million and likely isn't going to see a snap. I mean, something we haven't talked about. Sure, something could go wrong. It always can. Philip Rivers hasn't missed a game since 2006. So he's been Mr. Durable. And, the people that are like, well, you need to keep Brissett because he knows the offense. If something happens to Rivers, God, nothing's happened to Rivers in 15 years. I could be hit by a bus tomorrow. That doesn't mean that I'm going to pay somebody $21 million to stand in for me on this podcast, right?
Yeah, and he's the best. This is the best offensive line, I guess, he's perhaps played behind, and he's not mobile. It's not like, well, yeah, but the way he runs in traffic, he's going to get hit. He doesn't run in traffic. He gets rid of the ball. He's Dan Marino. He gets rid of the ball. You can't get to him because he's getting rid of the ball. So, yeah, I feel like with Brissett, the trade offers must have been – his trade market must be embarrassing. And the Colts just aren't going to say – they're not going to announce Jacoby Brissett was traded today for a 6th-round draft pick to the Bengals. They're not going to announce it, because that looks bad on them. So they're just keeping him. And now and I suspect he will be the backup. I suspect Eason will be a third teamer this first year, but maybe they're talking him up because just in case Rivers gets hurt, just in case, they want Brissett's head in the game. That's all I can think.
Yeah, I just think they're like you. They're getting pennies on the dollar for the offer, and so they feel like, let's just eat the 21. He's more valuable to us as a backup in 2020 than a 6th-round pick or a 7th-round pick, whatever it is. I love the Michael Pittman pick. I love what the Colts did with that because this was a very deep receiver draft, and there are guys at the top like Ruggs and CeeDee Lamb that might end up having more of an impact. But what the Colts really needed, Greg, they needed a second receiver. And it looks like, for all intents and purposes, there is absolutely no reason why Michael Pittman can't be, to borrow one of your terms, a really capable WR2 for the Colts, at least in the interim, and maybe someday a WR1 for them once T.Y. Hilton gets up there in age.
Yeah, the guy is 6'4", 220 and runs a 4.5, 240. That's you're describing Michael Evans, of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're describing, that's not many guys 6'4", 220 run. There's not a lot of AJ Greens out there that can do a 4.4 at that size. There's a reason AJ Green's the best in the world, because that's what. So he's not slow. And he apparently has great hands. He was targeted 175 times, or at least 175 passes were catchable, and he caught 170 of them in college, something like that. Crazy
5
number.
drops.
5 drops in 4 years.
Entire career. Yeah,
5 drops, 4 years.
Had 5 drops this morning. Eric
Ebron had 5 drops that one game against somebody, and I asked him, "What about all the drops?" And he goes, "What drops?" Okay, Eric, you go be you.
I'll miss him. And then Jonathan Taylor, the other 2nd-round pick. He was insanely productive at Wisconsin, as most Wisconsin running backs are. I saw him, Greg, have one of the greatest individual performances I've ever seen from a college player, at least in person. That 300-yard game in West Lafayette in triple overtime that Wisconsin won a couple of years ago. That said, 2 things I don't like about it. One, I don't like trading up and using draft capital on a running back. And 2, of all these guys that were insanely productive at Wisconsin, who really is the gold standard? Monte Ball, James White, Melvin Gordon, I guess the jury's still out on. Jonathan Taylor from a couple years ago. Ron Dayne was kind of a bust. He was okay. He hung around for a while, I guess.
Jonathan Taylor from a couple years ago. Who are you saying?
All these running backs from Wisconsin. I'm sorry, Jonathan Taylor, who they just drafted. But these guys from a couple of years ago in the 2000s that have been insanely productive Wisconsin backs. So Dane was 2000, right? Or was he 99? Anyway, you know what I mean. Most recent Wisconsin running backs, barely any of those guys have been really big impact players in the NFL. I mean, even James White. James White's fine. I don't know if he's an impact player, and I still don't know if Melvin Gordon is, but he's got to stop holding out and actually playing for he's got to be on good terms, I guess, with his team to show what he can do.
Not one of those guys is anywhere near as big as 6 foot, 220 pounds and an Olympic type sprinter. Ron Dayne was heavier but shorter. The other guys most of them were smaller. None of them are faster. I mean, none of them. The guy ran as an 18-year-old ran a 10.500, which means he could be faster now if he didn't take a pounding and wasn't probably heavier than he. Those measurements are crazy. They're stupid. And as good as Wisconsin backs are, and Ron Dayne's the record holder, Ron Dayne played 4 years. If Jonathan Taylor played 4 years, he'd have blown 1,000 yards past Dayne. I mean, he'd put that record out of reach. He'd have done to that record what Vinatieri, I think, just is going to do the scoring record. Just you're not going to catch him. It's too late. So no one will ever catch that. Jonathan Taylor was going to do that because no one's going to come around long run for 8,000 yards in 4 years. That's not going to happen, and it didn't happen with him because he's too good. So I'm not worried about the Wisconsin connection comparison. He's got nothing in common with James White aside from the fact they both wore red jerseys. That's it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Each player is his own guy. But what I worry about is these Wisconsin high-volume running backs. Taylor had 980 carries, I think, in 3 years. These high-volume guys, it's almost like they get chewed up and spit out in Madison, and by the time they get to the NFL, they end up just being, kind of okay. I guess the Colts only need him to be okay. I mean, in today's NFL, I don't think you really need to have the elite running back anymore. And Taylor can certainly be a compliment to Marlon Mack and then maybe eventually supersede him as a starter if they decide not to pay Mack. I mean, I'm fascinated. What I do like about the pick, Greg, is it shows that they hopefully aren't going to give the long-term extension to Mack because I just don't. It's nothing against Mack, who I think is a really nice player. I don't think you give the long-term lucrative extensions to guys like that.
No, they just drafted Mack's replacement for pennies on the dollar, and a guy is probably going to be as good as Mack. Probably is. And one thing about you're describing the Wisconsin backs, and my first thought was you're describing kind of these Japanese pitchers that they just get burned out in Japan, but they put up crazy numbers. They strike out crazy numbers of people. And they come over here and their arms are falling off because they pitched so many innings in Japan. I mean, there's very few exceptions, but there is the occasional exception. Taylor, 3 years, not 4. So that's a reason to believe. But another reason to believe is the guy just ran wind sprints to the end zone. I mean, he didn't get hit every time. He just kept running until the end zone stopped him a whole bunch. So anyway, I like the pick and I get. I mean, I guess I get a little bit how running backs are overvalued or well, not anymore. They've been. I get the trend towards we can go out and find somebody and yeah, a lot of times you can, but you can't find somebody like this. I think. I think if Marlon Mack doesn't play here next year, I think Jonathan Taylor runs for 1,500 yards. I mean, I think he's. So I mean, this guy strikes me as real special.
For whatever it's worth, he had more, and this is an insane stat, and I'm not going to take credit for it. I saw somebody else on my feed tweeted this. He had more 200-plus yard rushing games in college than he had single-digit, non-triple-digit, under 100-yard rushing games. So he had 12 200-plus yard rushing games. He was held under 100 yards 9 times. That's just stupid.
Pretty good.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly, incredibly productive. Anybody else from the rest of the draft class? Because look, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm a real expert on, Isaiah Rodgers' career at UMass. It sounds like he's going to be a nice special teams player for them. Ditto for the Glasgow kid from Michigan, who I actually did see play a little bit because he played in the Big Ten. But anybody else jumped out to you about in the later rounds that the Colts took?
Well, I mean, Rodgers, I there was reference to his speed, and I wasn't watching the draft, so I didn't. I had to Google like what was his time. It was apparently a 4.3 something. And Dominique Cromartie, Rogers' cousin. There's so many damn Cromarties out there. We had one here that stunk. I don't know. Was it that one that he's the cousin of?
Yeah, Antonio Cromartie, and then Dominique Rogers Cromartie.
Which one is he related to? He's related to Dominique, right?
Yes,
or
I think
both.
that's right.
Okay.
Let me look.
So he's apparently, I mean, he's got that kind of speed, which is real fascinating. That receiver out of, I guess, Washington State has similar measurables to Michael Pittman. That's very interesting to me. They got two of these big guys. It's interesting to me they love Pinter, love him as a center or a guard. And Ryan Kelly I think he's here for the next 8 years. We know Quentin Nelson's here for the next 10 years. Glowinski, they just re-upped him a couple years ago or a year ago. So I realized that you want depth in the offensive line. I guess they just drafted an elite backup at guard and center, which is pretty good to have.
Yeah, Joe Wright's. They want to have the Swiss Army knife guy, and they think that he can be maybe that Swiss Army knife guy for them. The kid from Utah, Blackman, I know some people were mad that maybe that was a little bit of a reach because it was a third round and he was projected as a fourth or fifth round guy. But it sounds like, he moved from corner to safety, so maybe he can be a little bit of a hybrid as a defensive back as well. Who knows? It's hard to really know, Greg, right? We're talking about these guys based on, 2 minutes of YouTube highlights. And I know there are people that dive into all of these prospects and it's what they do for a living. But, until a guy is actually drafted by the team, I can't pay attention to 800 different guys. You know what I mean? And then hope that the Colts draft some of them.
And the thing is that when you look at their highlights, the highlights are pretty much by definition them at their best.
Yeah, you're right.
Ben Banigou looked, and he's fine. He's a fine player, but I mean, you look at his highlights at TCU, and holy cow, he's going to be sacking people left and right. No, he's not. I mean, he's a nice college player, and he'll be a decent pro. But yeah, you look at the highlights. And, I mean, heck, if you just looked at my highlights writing stories, I write like 2 or 3 good ones a year. You might think, wow, that guy's really good. Now a couple times a year. That's all it takes. That's all.
You have a higher batting average than that. You have a higher batting average than that when it comes to the columns.
I got
definitely more doubles and triples and homers than strikeouts.
Rogers, Hornsby.
There you go. I wanted to
by the way, I'm so old I saw him play.
Yeah, that's right. We already talked about the facial hair being gray and the bald and all of that. One last thing that I wanted to fit in, because I'm reading it right now on the IndyStar sports section, IndyStar.com. Trace Jackson Davis going to come back for year number 2. He announced it on Twitter. I don't think that's really a surprise, Greg, but good to know that the Hoosiers are getting back a homegrown talent who, it's rare, and I don't want to make this sound like a knock on anybody specific, but sometimes these Mr. Basketballs and 5 stars come in and they're advertised as one thing and they end up being pretty good, but not quite what they're advertised as. I think Trace Jackson was just as good as what he was advertised as being, don't you?
He was actually he was a little better than I thought he was going to be. His ceiling is great, but when a 6'9" guy with no perimeter game, it's hard to dominate. It's hard because you're down low, you're against men, and he's still he's springier than everybody in high school. And damn it, he was springier than everybody in college too. That's hard to do. So he was better than I thought he'd be. Not much better, but a little bit better. So yeah, it's good he's coming back because if you're going to play in the NBA more than 8 minutes a game, you got to be able to put the ball on the floor and shoot threes. And maybe he hadn't shown us yet. But it's kind of a Jackson Davis, although they don't share the same last name, Taven Jackson. Right? Taven Jackson, not Jackson Davis, just Taven Jackson. Got a scholarship offer. His brother got a scholarship offer to IU. To play quarterback. And I saw Taven, I think it was a state championship game. In fact, I know it was. I don't think they won, but he was trying to rally him back. And apparently I saw him as his absolute best.
Oh,
but
wow.
it was the state championship game in the fourth quarter with the game, and not like garbage time where you're down 40, so you can just throw YOLO throws. No, they're down like 1 or 2 touchdowns, and he's driving the team. And I mean, it's all kinds of pressure in the world. And he was a sophomore. This is just a couple months ago. And what I saw was the future of Mr. Football. I mean, I saw a guy, and I told him after the game, hey, stay humble. I said to him, stay humble. But
I remember you mentioning this. Yeah. You
yeah,
talked about this on the podcast, I want to say.
yeah, I really enjoyed that moment because I not that who knows if he'll listen to me, but I enjoyed not just saying, wow, you're good, but trying to give him just a small little nudge of, because I'm sure his dad tells him that all the time. I'm sure his high school coaches tell him that all the time, but maybe hear it from somebody else. Hey, stay humble, but you're going to win Mr. Football in 2 years. So I'm not surprised IU offered him, and I can see him being a great player somewhere someday.
I feel like that's a future column in like 2022 or something like that. Maybe even sooner than that. You can check out the rest of Gregg's work. The Tri-West softball player. Tell me again what you call that. Senior class? Is that what you're calling that feature where you pick a new player every single week, an Indiana high school senior?
I call it my senior class project, and senior class is one word, #senior class. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And yeah, the Tri-West softball last week, Bishop Chatard track coming up this week on Thursday. These kids have great stories. They've got great stories, and some of them don't know they have great stories. And they're like, their coaches are suggesting, hey, why don't you write about this senior? And they just think that senior's good or a nice person. And I get that senior on the phone, and I find out, wait a minute, what? These people all have a wait a minute, what in their background, and the challenge is figuring out what that what is and getting them to admit it and talk about it. But I've enjoyed it very much. I've got one coming up, by the way, in a few weeks. Will blow your mind. I mean, I've written 5 or 6 of them so far. I think the one this week is 6. Number 7 will absolutely blow your mind.
Looking forward to it. Also, Jacob Eason and your thoughts on the draft. You can check it all out at IndyStar.com. Please subscribe if you aren't already and support that local journalism. And we'll be back soon with another edition of the Doyle and Derek podcast. I'm assuming still on video as well. Gregg, you have a great week, my man.
I appreciate you, Derek. Thank you. You too.